Halloween is supposed to be about fake scares, right? Jack-o'-lanterns, spooky costumes, and kids begging for candy. But what happens when the line between a playful fright and real-life terror blurs? What if the monster at your door isn't wearing a mask? Tonight we're dimming the lights and diving into 3 true stories that prove sometimes the most terrifying things happen on Halloween night. These aren't urban legends or campfire tales. These are chilling real-life encounters that will make you think twice about who or what is knocking. Our first story takes us back to 1982, in a quiet suburban town. A young couple, let's call them Mark and Lisa, were hosting their first Halloween party. Their house was decked out, the music was playing, and friends in costume were mingling. The vibe was perfect. As the night went on, a man nobody seemed to know arrived. He was dressed as a jester, but his costume was unsettlingly realistic, almost theatrical. He didn't talk much, just stood in the corner, watching everyone with an unnerving stillness. People assumed he was a friend of a friend, the classic party mystery guest. Mark, being a good host, walked over to offer him a drink. He asked the jester who he knew at the party. The man just stared back, his painted smile looking more like a grimace under the dim party lights. He didn't say a word. Feeling a bit creeped out, Mark shrugged it off and rejoined his friends. But for the rest of the night, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time he glanced over, the jester was there, motionless. Later, as the party started to wind down and guests began to leave, Mark noticed the jester was gone. He felt a wave of relief. He and Lisa started cleaning up, laughing about the strange, silent guest. It was then that Lisa went into their bedroom to change and let out a blood-curdling scream. Mark rushed in to find her staring at their closet, pale as a ghost. The closet door was ajar, and on the floor, placed neatly in the center, was the jester's mask. They searched the entire house, their hearts pounding. He was gone. Nothing was stolen, nothing was broken, except for their sense of security. The police were called, but they found no signs of forced entry. The man had simply walked in, watched them for hours, entered their most private space, left a single terrifying calling card, and vanished. They never found out who he was or why he was there. The only thing they knew for sure was that a complete stranger had been silently observing them all night, a ghost at their own party. They moved out a few months later, forever haunted by the image of that silent, smiling jester. Next, we journey to a rural part of Ohio in the late 90s. A single mother named Karen lived with her 10-year-old son Ben in a small house at the end of a long, wooded lane. Halloween was Ben's favorite holiday, and that year he was especially excited to go trick-or-treating as a vampire. Karen, being protective, had a strict rule. They only visited houses of people they knew, and they had to be home by 8 p.m. sharp. They made their rounds, their bags filling with candy, and were heading home just as darkness fully settled. The lane leading to their house was long and dark, flanked by dense woods. As they walked, the sound of crunching leaves behind them made them stop. Karen turned, expecting to see a neighbor, but there was no one there. She brushed it off as an animal and urged Ben to walk a little faster. But the footsteps started again, this time closer, more deliberate. It wasn't the scattered crunch of a deer. It was the distinct rhythm of someone walking. A heavy tread. Karen's heart began to race. She shone her flashlight back down the lane, but the beam was swallowed by the darkness. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling slightly. Silence. She grabbed Ben's hand and they started to run. The footsteps behind them quickened, keeping pace. It was a terrifying chase in the pitch black, with only the narrow beam of her flashlight to guide them. They could hear heavy breathing now, just behind them. They finally burst through their front door, Karen slamming and locking it behind them, her hands shaking so badly she could barely turn the deadbolt. She ran to the window, peering through the blinds. And that's when she saw him. A large man, not in a costume, was standing at the edge of their yard, right where the woods began. He just stood there staring at the house. He wasn't a trick-or-treater, he wasn't a neighbor. He was just a dark figure watching them from the shadows. She called 911 immediately. By the time the sheriff's deputy arrived, the man was gone. They canvassed the area but found nothing. For the rest of the year, every time Karen heard a twig snap in the woods, She was transported back to that terrifying night, to the feeling of being hunted on the one night of the year when predators can so easily hide in plain sight. For our final and perhaps most disturbing story, we go to a college town in 2004. 3 roommates, Sarah, Emily, and Jessica, were having a low-key Halloween. They decided against parties and instead carved pumpkins and watched horror movies in their small, off-campus apartment. Around 11 p.m., there was a knock at the door. They weren't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, Sarah saw a man dressed in a simple, generic ghost costume, a white sheet with eye holes cut out. He was holding a plastic pumpkin bucket. It was late for trick-or-treaters, but they figured it was probably another student playing a prank. "Sorry, we're all out of candy," Jessica shouted through the door. The figure didn't move. He just stood there. Then he knocked again, louder this time, a hard, insistent thudding. Annoyed, Sarah opened the door, just a crack. "Look, we don't have anything," she said firmly. The man under the sheet didn't speak. He just slowly lifted his hand and pointed a finger directly at Sarah. It wasn't a playful gesture. It was menacing. A chill went down her spine. She slammed the door and locked it. The girls huddled in the living room, spooked. They thought that would be the end of it. But then they heard a scratching sound at the window. Peeking through the curtains, they saw the same sheet-clad figure outside, dragging his fingernails down the glass. The sound was like nails on a chalkboard. They screamed and backed away from the window, grabbing their phones to call the police. As they were on the phone with the dispatcher, the scratching stopped. But it was replaced by a new sound, the rattling of their front doorknob. He was trying to get in. The girls retreated to the back bedroom, barricading the door with a dresser, listening in absolute terror as the doorknob jiggled violently. Then, silence. When the police arrived minutes later, there was no one there. But on their front door, etched into the wood with what looked like a knife, were 3 crude stick figures. The next day, their landlord reviewed the security footage from the hallway. The video showed the man in the sheet. But the most horrifying part was what happened when he finally turned away from their door. As he walked down the hall, he lifted the sheet for just a second to adjust it. Underneath, he wasn't wearing a mask. It was just his face, and he was smiling. These stories remind us that while we revel in the fantasy of fear on Halloween, real-world dangers don't take a holiday. The mask of a monster can hide a real one, and a playful knock can be a prelude to a nightmare. So this Halloween, have fun, be safe, and maybe, just maybe, be a little more careful about who you open the door for. Thank you so much for watching. If these stories gave you the chills, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the dark side. Stay safe out there, and have a happy Halloween. Halloween is all about fun scares, right? Costumes, candy, maybe a cheesy horror movie. But what happens when the line blurs? When the fake monsters and staged frights are replaced by something terrifyingly real? Tonight, we're not talking about ghost stories made up around a campfire. We're diving into 3 chilling true events that all happened on Halloween night, turning a celebration of spooky fun into an unforgettable nightmare. These aren't just stories, they're cautionary tales, reminders that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones who don't wear a mask. So, lock your doors, check your windows, and settle in as we unmask the fear behind 3 true stories of Halloween nightmares. Our first story takes us back to a quiet suburban street, the kind that seems plucked right out of a movie. Halloween night was in full swing. Kids in adorable costumes were running from door to door, their laughter echoing through the crisp autumn air. Among them was a young boy, let's call him Leo, dressed as a superhero, his plastic pumpkin bucket already half full of candy. He was with his older sister, who was keeping a watchful eye from a few houses down, chatting with her friends. Leo, feeling brave, decided to approach one last house on the block. It was a bit darker than the others, with only a single dim porch light flickering ominously. He rang the bell, held out his bucket, and shouted the familiar phrase, "Trick or treat." The door creaked open and a man in a simple, eerie clown mask stood there. He didn't say a word, just dropped a few pieces of candy into Leo's bucket. As Leo turned to leave, He felt a cold hand grab his arm. The man's grip was like iron. "Where do you think you're going?" a gravelly voice whispered from behind the mask. "The party's just getting started." Leo's blood ran cold. He tried to scream, but the sound caught in his throat. He could see his sister in the distance, oblivious. What happened next is the part that will haunt you. The clown wasn't just a costume. It was a disguise for someone with sinister intentions. Thankfully, Leo's sister noticed he'd been gone too long. Her casual glance toward the dark house turned into a sprint when she saw the door closing with her little brother still on the porch. Her screams, combined with Leo finally finding his voice, alerted the whole neighborhood. The man, startled by the sudden attention, shoved Leo away and slammed the door shut. When the police arrived, they found the house empty. The man had vanished into the night, leaving behind nothing but a few pieces of cheap candy and a neighborhood forever scarred. Leo was physically unharmed, but the psychological trauma lingered. The incident served as a horrifying reminder that on a night when everyone is wearing a mask, you never truly know who is standing on the other side of the door. The cheerful clown, a symbol of fun, had become a real-life boogeyman. Our second tale comes from a group of college students who thought they'd found the perfect Halloween activity, exploring an abandoned asylum on the edge of town. It was a cliché, they knew, but the thrill was irresistible. Armed with flashlights and a camera to document their adventure, the four friends, Mia, Ben, Chloe, and Sam, snuck past the crumbling "no trespassing" signs. The air inside was heavy and stale, thick with the scent of decay and dust. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind through broken windows, sent a delicious shiver down their spines. They were living their own horror movie. They explored the patient wards, the derelict operating theater, and the eerie cafeteria, laughing and daring each other to go further into the darkness. It was all fun and games until they reached the basement. The atmosphere shifted immediately. It was colder, darker, and the sense of being watched was overwhelming. Ben, the designated cameraman, was filming their reactions when his flashlight beam caught something in the corner, a collection of old, tattered children's toys, arranged in a perfect circle. In the center of the circle was a single, modern-looking doll. It was pristine, completely out of place among the decay. Chloe, unnerved, told everyone they should leave. That's when they heard it. A faint, childish giggle echoing from the far end of the long, dark corridor. They froze, flashlights trained on the source of the sound. The giggling stopped. Silence. Sam, trying to be the brave one, called out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" The only reply was the sound of a small object rolling across the concrete floor. It came to a stop just at the edge of their light, a single marble. They hadn't seen a marble anywhere before. Panic set in. This wasn't part of their game. They scrambled back towards the stairs, their hearts pounding in their chests. As they ran, the giggling started again, this time seeming to come from all around them, closer and more menacing. They burst out of the asylum, gasping for air, not stopping until they were back in their car, speeding away. When they later reviewed Ben's footage, they made a discovery that chilled them to the bone. In the final seconds of the basement recording, as they were running away, a small, shadowy figure could be seen darting across the corridor behind them. They never went back, and the asylum's dark secrets remained undisturbed. They had gone looking for a scare and found something real, a ghostly whisper from the past that they would never forget. For our final story, we traveled to a small town where Halloween is the biggest event of the year. The annual haunted hayride was legendary, drawing crowds from miles around. It was a massive production, with volunteer actors, elaborate sets built deep in the woods, and plenty of jump scares. One year, a new attraction was added, a scarecrow maze at the end of the ride. Participants were meant to navigate a winding path through a cornfield, populated by actors dressed as scarecrows who would jump out at them. A teenager named Jack and his girlfriend Sarah were excited to be among the first to try it. The hayride was fantastic, full of spooky fun, and they eagerly hopped off to enter the maze. The cornstalks were tall, creating a claustrophobic effect. The moon was bright, casting long, dancing shadows. A few scarecrows jumped out, earning screams and laughter from the couple. But as they got deeper into the maze, they noticed one scarecrow that was different. It wasn't jumping out. It was just standing there, eerily still, its burlap sack head tilted at an unnatural angle. It was far more realistic than the others. Jack, trying to impress Sarah, walked up to it and poked it. "This one's pretty good," he said, expecting it to be a dummy. It didn't move. They laughed it off and continued on their way. A few minutes later, they took a wrong turn and ended up back in the same spot. The scarecrow was still there, but this time its head was tilted in the other direction. A cold knot of dread formed in Jack's stomach. It had to be their imagination, right? They hurried away, their pace quickening. The playful screams from other parts of the maze now sounded distant and muffled. They felt truly alone. They rounded another corner, and there it was again, standing right in the middle of their path. There was no way it could have moved that fast. This was not an actor. It was something else. Its posture was rigid, its button eyes seeming to stare right through them. They turned to run, but the path behind them was now blocked by another identical scarecrow, and another. They were being herded. Panic turned to pure terror as they realized the figures were slowly, silently closing in. They weren't jumping or yelling. They were just walking, a silent, relentless advance. Jack and Sarah screamed, not in fun, but in genuine fear. Their cries finally alerted a security guard, who found them cornered and hysterical. The strange scarecrows were gone, vanished back into the corn. No other actors or attendees reported seeing them. The event organizers had no explanation. Jack and Sarah had stumbled into a part of the maze that wasn't on the map, a place where the make-believe monsters were replaced by something inexplicably real. These stories aren't meant to ruin your Halloween, but to add a layer of genuine chill to the season. They remind us that behind the costumes and decorations, the world can still be a strange and unsettling place. The line between a fun fright and real fear can be terrifyingly thin. So, this Halloween, enjoy the festivities, but stay aware. And if you see something that seems a little too real, a little too out of place, maybe it is. Thanks for watching. If you have a true scary story you'd like to share, leave it in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more chilling content. Stay safe out there.